and we're going to talk about the much talked about mental health issues and hope to shed light on this matter. Now, I, at the outset, have to apologize. Most of the research I'm going to show you will be basically from the US, but then I tried to look for Philippine statistics, and there was there's a scarcity of data, but I managed to find a few. But anyway, the concern is worldwide. So yes, just a little bit of for our friends who I know many of us are already acquainted. So good evening from California, and good morning to you all. Since the last time we met, I've been involved in, as mentioned, clinical research. And without mentioning the clients that I have worked with, we have developed drugs for. The first one is on depression. So I can speak some on the clinical trial on depression, and also recently the COVID-19 drugs. So currently we just completed the adult version, and now I'm involved in the pediatric version. So that's what is keeping me busy. And of course, during the weekends, we are still pastoring a church in San Diego. And that is a blessing as well. So maybe I can just start talking. And let me just say that millions of people are affected by mental illness each year. And this is not just in the US or in the Philippines, but all over the world. Many people, just like all of us that work, perform, create, compete, laugh, love, pray, inspire every day, are affected by it. So here are some statistics, and you'll be surprised. All right. Now, again, most of these are in the US, but I guess this is true everywhere as well. So in the US, 1 out of 5 adults experience mental illness. 1 out of 5, that's 20%. That's a huge chunk. And then 1 in 20 adults experience a more serious kind of mental illness. So that's also a severe or big number. And then about the youth, about 17% of the youth ages 6 to 17 experience a kind of mental disorder. So this is no laughing matter now, because it's affecting all classes and all ages. Now, according to the statistics, the biggest chunk of that is anxiety disorder. That's the number one. If you look at the rank and categories amongst the prevalence of mental illness, anxiety disorder accounts for 19% of that number. So it's the biggest. I guess everyone is worried at some point or the other. And this is the past 12 months. It might have increased because of COVID-19, the loss of jobs, the loss of opportunities. But right now, anxiety disorder is the biggest at 19%, followed by depression, 8%. All right, nearly half. And then next would be post-traumatic stress disorder. So now everybody's recognizing the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. That's a 4%, followed by bipolar disorder, and then of course the rest are 1%, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. These are the diagnoses that make up the chunk of mental health problems across the United States. Now, if you look at the prevalence amongst the adults, again, 21% of all the adults are affected by it. 14% of those are Asians here in the US. 17% are Black Americans. 17% Pacific Islanders, like Hawaiians, Native Hawaiian. 18% Hispanic. 19% Native American population, and the highest is 22% for the white adults. So, if you look at the statistics, Asians are way below in the scale, but it's still affecting all of us. Now, here are the common signs of mental illness in both the adults and adolescents. So I guess you might want to get a piece of paper and find out if you might have one or more of the symptoms. All right. So number one is excessive worrying or fear. Right now, worry might be, part of life, but excessive anxiety and fear is already a sign of mental illness. Feeling excessively, that's the big word here, excessively sad or feeling excessively low, right? Next would be confused thinking, meaning problems with concentration and learning. You cannot concentrate. Then you have extreme mood changes, like highs and of euphoria and then lows of sadness. Prolonged or strong feelings of irritability or anger, right? We are angered once in a while, but prolonged and yet strong feelings of this are signs of mental illness. Avoiding friends and social activities, okay? Difficulty of understanding or relating to other people will be another. Changes in sleeping habits or feeling tired and low energy. And then changes in eating habits such as increased hunger or lack of appetite. Okay, so those are the common signs, and then there are, of course, the more serious signs. Now, once you see them, you might probably want to see your doctor, like a change. Number one would be change in sex drive. Number two will be difficulty of perceiving reality. If you're having delusions, and there are many kinds, one would be auditory. You hear voices. Visual, you see people, ghosts, hallucinations, things that really don't exist, but you see them. Next, inability to perceive changes in your own feelings, behavior, or personality. People who have mental illness don't seem to see what's wrong with them. And then multiple physical ailments without obvious causes, right? You're having headaches and stomach aches, vague and ongoing aches and pains, and you don't even know why, and no one can find a diagnosis for this. Then of course there's this thing called thinking about suicide. Now that's really serious. Inability to carry out daily activities or even handle those daily problems and stresses. You cannot cope up anymore. And then of course intense fear of weight gain, all right, and or concern for appearance. These are ranked as more serious signs of mental illness. So for this, I guess you should reach out to your physician and ask for help. Now, in children, believe it or not, mental conditions also begin to develop in young children. And because they're still learning how to identify and talk about their thoughts and emotions, the more obvious symptoms are mostly behavioral, something that you can observe. You may not be able to, they may not be able to express them, but definitely you can see these changes in kids. And these are, number one, change in school performance. Someone is able to do well, suddenly becomes bored or starts getting F mark on grades. Excessive worry or anxiety. For instance, they uh, excessive fighting, they get into trouble, or they try to avoid school, or even they try to avoid going to bed. Next would be hyperactive behavior, frequent nightmares, frequent disobedience, or even aggression towards people they respect. and then frequent temper tantrums. So that's the keyword there, frequent. These are signs of mental health problems in young kids. So mental health conditions are far more common than everyone thinks. And mostly because people don't like to talk about them, they are mostly undiagnosed, especially in the Philippines. In the Philippines, it is a stigma to see a psychiatrist or even to talk to a therapist. It means you have failed in your ability to cope with life. And so I believe in the Philippines, this is an undiagnosed or underdiagnosed condition. Again, as mentioned here in America, 20% of adults experience this. And believe it or not, 50% of all lifetime mental illness, they begin by age 14. All right. And 75% begin by age 24. So they begin very early. So if you start seeing these changes early on, then it's time to reach out and seek out a professional. Now, why is this so concerning? Why is this so distressing? Because mental illness it's not only a personal problem. It is a community problem, a family problem, and it becomes a global problem. There is a ripple effect when someone has mental illness. Let me just show you some of this information here. Now, people with depression, have a 40% higher risk of developing cardiovascular and metabolic diseases than the general population. So people are depressed are more prone, more likely to have heart conditions or diabetes. All right. And people with serious mental illness are nearly twice likely to develop these conditions. All right. So for amongst the adults, 32.1% with mental illness would also have a substance abuse disorder eventually. And for the US, that's roughly around 17 million individuals. So more than 30% who are depressed might seek out drugs as a solution for that depression. Now, the rate of unemployment is higher among the adults with mental illness than those who do not. High school students with significant symptoms of depression are more twicely likely to drop out of school. And then students aged 6 to 17 with mental or emotional or behavioral concerns are 3 times more likely to fail a grade and repeat a grade. Now, talking about the family, the effect on the family is at least 8.4 million people in the US would need to have someone to take care of them because of their mental illness. You know, parents are missing work because they have to take care of their kids. They have to go to school and, meet with the principal. Husbands and wives have to miss work because they have to take care of each other. And sometimes the children suffer. Caregiver of adults with mental or emotional health issues spend around an average of 32 hours per week just to take care of their loved one. Now, what about the community? Now, mental illness and substance use disorders are the reason for 1 out of 8 emergency department visits in the adult population. So 1 out of 8 emergency care visits are due to mental illness or substance abuse. And mood disorders are the most common cause of hospitalization, all right, of all the people in the US under age 45. So in the US economy, serious mental illness costs around 193 billion in lost earnings each year. All right, people don't work, people can't go to work because of this. Now, 20% of people experiencing homelessness have serious mental health conditions. And that's really glaring here in the US. You can see people talking to themselves, all right, like shouting, crying on their own. 37% of those who are in jail have a diagnosed mental illness. And 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system also have a diagnosable mental health problem. So that's the effect on the community. About the world, well, depression and anxiety disorders cost the economy close to $1 trillion in lost productivity each year. And depression is still the leading cause of disability worldwide. So this is no small matter. The effect is not just on the person, the effect is global. So common warning signs. So this you might want to write this down. Okay, warning signs. Diagnosing mental illness is not easy. It's not a straightforward science. It's not like you get a blood test and you can figure out what's wrong with a person. So what caregivers need to do is to watch out for these very serious signs, the warning signs of mental illness. And number one would be when you see them feeling very sad and withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. That's already a warning sign. More than 2 weeks. Those who try to harm themselves or end one's life, or even just plan to do that, is a warning sign. Those with severe out of control risk-taking behavior that causes them to harm themselves or others. People who walk on the ledge and pretend to fly or try to fly out of the ledge. All right, out of control risk-taking behaviors, sudden overwhelming fear for no reason, significant weight loss or weight gain. Those who say or complain of seeing and hearing and believing things that are not real. Excessive use of alcohol and of drugs. Drastic changes in their mood, behavior, personality, and even sleeping habits. Extreme difficulty of concentrating or staying still. And then intense worries or fears that interfere with their daily activities. These are warning signs. You see them in yourself or anybody that you love, it's time to reach out to a healthcare professional, right? Now, of course, there are stages. Stage one would just be mild symptoms with some warning signs. Stage two would be symptoms that would interfere with life activities. When they stop thinking about going to work and they don't want to do anything. Stage three would be worsening of these symptoms that end up in severe and serious disruption of life activities and roles. They don't go to church anymore. They don't want to leave the house. And of course, stage four, they're trying to jeopardize their own life and others. So watch out for this. Now, for the young adults, here are some numbers that might scare you. Among adolescents, 1 out of 6 adolescents experience a major depressive episode. 3 million had serious thoughts of suicide. And 31% of these young people end up in the ER because of this. All right. So this is alarming as well, not only for the adults, but also for our teenagers. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about what are the causes of this. And that's the thing about mental health problems. There are many possible triggers, But for our topic today, we're just going to talk about and focus on the biology of depression. All right. When I remember going through my rotation in psychiatry, and for a month we were, our role was talk to and to new patients and old patients, and it seems like when you talk to them, it's not as simple as what happened. When did the fever start? When did your blood pressure go up? It's more like what happened when you were a kid. It's sometimes the history of the development of mental problems go way back when they were very young. And so we end up writing a 5-page story of all the triggers that contributed to mental illness. So it's really hard to diagnose that socially, emotionally. But here are some of the, shall we say, biological changes in our body that's been associated with depression. Number one would be an imbalance in neurotransmitters. Okay, we have chemicals in our brain that trigger, activity, and usually an imbalance. Too much of it or too little of it will contribute to a depression. Next would be an imbalance in, and that leads to an imbalance on the brain wave activity, because there's less chemical that's triggering activity. The brain waves begin to slow down, and that's an observable sign through EEG. Believe it or not, nutrition plays a big role in this too. Poor diet and deficiency in certain nutrients. Many of those who are homeless and end up being diagnosed with mental illness are probably um, nutritionally deficient. All right, vitamin B complex could contribute. The lack of vitamin B vitamins, all right, would contribute big on this. Of course, hormonal imbalance like cortisol or the stress hormones, those that are norepinephrine also. And then, believe it or not, chronic low-grade inflammation. And they attribute that to stress. It's inflammation in many parts of the body that causes aches and pains, but there's no one specific reason or cause. It's not an infection, it's not a virus, it's stress. And then for gut health, increasing intestinal permeability, causing a leaky gut, therefore you absorb a lot of toxins, and so you have that contributes to the biology of depression. So these are some of the things that um, were associated with depression. Now let's look at the Philippine numbers. Okay, again, I tried to look for more current ones, but I only found a 2017 report. But by then, or back then, DOH estimates that at least 3.6 Filipinos are facing mental health issues. All right, and that's not because of the pandemic alone, but because of a lot of things, and it includes depression, substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, and mood disorders like bipolar diseases. Right? Of course, the COVID-19 infection in itself has been found to directly impact a person's mental health. All right. Now, according to a recent DOH study, they found that 1 out of 3 COVID-19 patients in the Philippines was also diagnosed with mental health conditions within 6 months of testing positive for COVID-19. All right, so 1 out of 3 is a huge number. 1 out of 3 patients with COVID-19 become depressed within 6 months. And of course, they also found out that government mandated lockdowns to prevent the spread of virus, and the associated social isolation has exacerbated or have exacerbated existing health challenges. You see that, all right? So that's the Philippine numbers, okay? So furthermore, these are the more common mental health issues in the Philippines. The most common is depression. In 2017, there were about 3.3 million cases. That's close to 4% of the population. Second in the list is anxiety, another common mental health condition that accounts for around 3 million cases. And of course, suicide attempts. All right, suicide attempt is also number 3. Number 4 will be abuse of psychoactive drugs or drug abuse, accounts for 2.3%, affecting 1.8 million people ages 10 to 69. But then, of course, if you look at the underlying cause for substance abuse, it's still depression. So depression number 1, anxiety number 2, suicide attempt, and of course, abuse of psychoactive drugs are the common problems. Okay, so let me stop here and say that asking for help does not make you a failure. If you need to ask for help, please do so sooner rather than later. Okay. Yep. So we ask for help, and I'm asking for help too. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I'd like to just say that I know we would like to offer you some remedy, but it's really important that you seek a physician so you can be properly diagnosed and you can be properly treated. So no one is beyond help. And if you think you need to see a therapist, please, or a counselor, or even your pastor, or a friend, a counselor friend, please seek them out so you can share this burden with them. So again, this is a multifactorial problem. If your problem is nutrition, then you need to get healthy. All right. We have Pagani greens that we recommend for that. If there is a hormonal imbalance or immune system problem, then you need to get some of our products. And right now, you are familiar. If you're not familiar with the products, we have two Pagani greens for our overall health and red reishi. So for those of you who are just looking into this for the first time, we highly recommend Ganoderma lucidum. It is a mushroom with a very long history of use in China, Japan, and a lot of Asian countries. If you've seen one, you will see that it's a kidney shaped, very dark mushroom with a glossy exterior and a woody texture. It's like the bark of a tree. In fact, the name, the scientific name is from that. Uh, Lucidum means shiny, okay, brilliant, all right. In China, they call this lingxi. In Japan, they call this reishi. And we promote the use of this as a supplement and an overall health um, nutraceutical because the mushroom contains a wide variety of biologically active compounds like triterpenoids, steroids, phenols, nucleotides, glycoproteins, and polysaccharides, more than 200 of them. Many years ago, maybe now 2 decades ago, when we were beginning to talk about this, there was maybe only a few that has been identified. But right now, you'll be surprised that scientists from all over the world have been studying this, and they have been identifying many biologically active compounds that are unique to the mushroom itself. In fact, many of these compounds are named after the mushroom, like uh, ganoderic acid, lucidenic acid, or ganolucidinic acid, ganoderan, and so on and so forth. So they've identified unique compounds that are biologically active, meaning it interacts with their own health. So this is not just a wishful product. I mean, we don't promote this only because of anecdotes, but right now there's solid evidence that scientists all over the world, including our prestigious UCLA here, have been coming up with as far as the benefits of Ganoderma is concerned. Uh, there's a bulk of science behind the use of this mushroom on cancer. All right, I talk about this all the time. In the research department, in the research area in Indiana, they found that it inhibits the growth of tumors, also prevents the spread of cancer, and it also blocks the ability of blood to supply tumors. And these are direct effects of taking the mushroom on a regular basis. They've also been applied to many other conditions like the immune system. It's been found, there's a study in Beijing, China, that it helps build up and strengthen and normalize immune system function. All right. So if you're hyper or hypo in your immune system, this would be a helpful product to take. It also has some respiratory benefits like preventing and relieving the attacks of asthma. This is from a Taiwanese study. And then, of course, inflammation. Speaking of inflammation, it helps reduce inflammation, especially in arthritis. Okay. Now, as mentioned, there are plenty of research around the mushroom, but right now, because our topic is on mental health, let's just focus on mental health. So our brain cells are made up of these weird-looking cells called neurons, and each neuron is attached to another neuron, so that an electric impulse coming from here is transmitted to the next one by the release of chemicals at the end. The ends are called synapses. So where they end and when this begins, there's a space right there where chemicals are released. So once the chemicals from the end of the first neuron is released to the second neuron, then the second neuron is triggered. All right. And in normal functioning brain cells, the neurotransmitters are always available. Right. So this is a snapshot of that. So these are chemicals that come to the end. They are released in the synapse. Serotonin is one of them. And serotonin activates the next neuron. And that's how you transmit impulses. And these impulses are turned into memories and action potential and, of course, brain functioning. Now, in depression, one of two things happen. Number one, you have very little chemicals that are produced or that linger in this area right here. So the next neurons are not properly triggered. So that's called a depression of signal. All right. So instead of you being awake, you're now more sluggish. The other reason here is that usually after the chemicals are released here and after they trigger the next neuron, they are retaken or uptaken or reabsorbed. I think that's the word there. Reabsorbed by the synapse here so they can be recycled. And sometimes there's a problem right here. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the drug Prozac. It's the most common antidepressive drug agent right now here. What it does is it blocks the reuptake or reabsorption of the serotonin. So it stays longer in the synapse and ends up triggering the cells even much more. So it's called a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It blocks this receptor right here. So there's more serotonin in the cleft or the synaptic cleft right here, or the space right here, to expose the next neuron and trigger a better response. Now, why is that important? Because I'm going to show you the next research here, the first research here, right? Please don't mind the verbiage. I'll just read it and then I'll explain to you what the research is about. This research is from Japan, and the title of the research is Antidepressant-like Effects of Water-Soluble Extract from the Culture Medium of Ganoderma lucidum mycelium in rats. Okay, that's a mouthful, but this is what they found out. So they already know that Ganoderma has antioxidant and brain protection effects against injury. If you have stroke, it protects the brain from further developing injury. They already found that out. Now they want to evaluate, is Ganoderma also good for antidepressant or alleviating anxiety effects? And what better, creature to test this is in rats. Now you might be saying, why rats? Why not people? Well, people are harder to diagnose actually. And before you test them on people, you have to test them on animals. And the best animal would be rats, believe it or not, because scientists already know what the fears of rats are. They know what makes them afraid or anxious, so they can test them properly. All right, and I've known that through my early research in depression. So they gave the rats, experimental animals, Ganoderma 60 minutes before they were tested. Now rats are afraid of water, so they forced them to swim. They're afraid of elevation, all right, or so on and so forth. And so they gave them Ganoderma before they made them go through the test. And they investigated chemically the antidepressant action of Ganoderma. And do you know what they found out? That the treatment of Ganoderma exhibited antidepressant-like effects. And when they looked into the chemical effect of Ganoderma, they found out And here's a big word here, antagonism of the 5-HT2A receptors. What does that mean? All right, going back here, Ganoderma blocks the reuptake or reabsorption of serotonin, just like Prozac, but in a natural way. So serotonin stays longer and causes the better triggering of the next receptor. So their conclusion, yes, it does possess anxiolytic, meaning anxiety relieving effects, as well as stress-inducing effect and antidepressant-like potentials in these rats. That's really interesting. It's like Prozac. Another study here is entitled Ganoderma polysaccharides also produce depression ameliorated or improved depression-like behaviors in chronic social defeat stress this depression, also in rats, right? And in their study, they found something different. So major depressive disorder is prevalent, chronic, and recurring. And 1/3 of patients with this major depressive disorder are treatment resistant. All right, they don't respond to Prozac very well. And one of the mechanisms they found is inflammation in the brain. All right, inflammation in the brain. So, because Ganoderma is an anti-inflammatory immunomodulatory agent, they tried to ask the question, can Ganoderma help in this regard? So the conclusion is, let's just go straight to the conclusion. We found that injecting, all right, the rats 60 minutes again before the test has an antidepressant effect, and it occurs 60 minutes after, immediately after they gave the Ganoderma to these rats. And the antidepressant effect, just one dose, remained for 5 days in the rats. So it started, the effect started immediately, the 60 minutes, and the effect of one dose is 5 days. And they attribute that to the suppression of the inflammatory mechanisms in the brain. So now we are looking at Ganoderma, and we're seeing that Ganoderma helps with depression in 2 ways. One, it blocks the reuptake of the neurochemicals, and 2, it helps on the prevention of inflammation that causes the prolongation of the depression. Right. So it helps with depression, is what we're seeing right here. But that's not all, right? I also found this, and probably our ladies would like this. Ganoderma lucidum also affects the mood and the health-related quality of life in women with fibromyalgia. All right, so what is fibromyalgia? It is a syndrome, multiple symptoms of this chronic rheumatic disorder characterized by generalized and widespread musculoskeletal pain. I know some of us can relate to this. We have aches and pains all over the body without one specific cause. That's called fibromyalgia. And you know what that is? That's a result of psychological and pain-specific distress caused by stress. Right? So I think when you are much older, when you have aches and pains, we just say, I'm old, that's why I have back pains. But most of these are fibromyalgia syndromes related to stress. Now, the question they're trying to look at is, can Ganoderma help improve fibromyalgia? That includes depression and pain. And so the purpose of the study is to evaluate the effects of Ganoderma on happiness, depression, satisfaction with life, health-related quality of life in women with fibromyalgia. And what they found, of course, this is now on women. 64 women were taken into this, enrolled in this clinical trial. Half of them were given Ganoderma, and the other half were given placebo. And what they found out was, look at the last paragraph here, there's a distinct, significant trend in improving the levels of happiness and satisfaction with life and reduction of depression in the group that took the Ganoderma, right? So I think you'll be happy to hear that. All right. And of course, anxiety, they evaluated the use of Ganoderma in anxiety in mice. So they tried to use different species and they gave different mice a different extracts, and then they subjected them to a test called the elevated plus maze model. So this is what the test looks like. All right. Those that are anxious will not cross this plank. They will just move from one closed end to the other. Those that are anxious will just run straight right here. But those who are not afraid, those who are not anxious will walk the plank. So they gave the mice Ganoderma, and the other ones they gave them placebo. And what they found out is that those that were given placebo will just walk the plank straight here because they are anxious or afraid. But those who were given Ganoderma, they were braver as they were able to walk through the open arms. And that's what this test is all about. All right. So there's a significant increase in the average time spent in the open arms versus the control. So they're saying that it clearly is also able to help relieve anxiety. I know this is really a mouthful, and some of the science are truly deep for some of us. But my point here is, can reishi help? Science shows that it does help alleviate depression, anxiety, and fibromyalgia in this population, in this experimental subjects. Now, I've been on one part of clinical research. I've worked with a team that helps see a drug through, and we started actually with mice as well. And once you prove that it works on mice, FDA accepts that result, and then they allow you to do human studies. So I know that some of this research will not progress to human studies, but the mice result is significant enough to tell us that it will help us definitely with our own conditions. So my recommendation, of course, is just for overall daily use, take 2 capsules of red reishi every day. And then if you have concerns about your health, then take 4 capsules. That'll be 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening. And for more serious concerns like tumors or cancer or hypertension that doesn't go down, or diabetes that's with sugar levels really, really high, and you should take 6 capsules immediately and taper them off within 3 to 6 weeks. Now, I cannot end the presentation without mentioning, of course, prayer. We've been encouraged by Paul in Philippians chapter 4 that besides keeping ourselves healthy, besides red reishi, there's a bigger remedy that's available to all of us, and that is prayer. And Paul says, don't be afraid of, anxious about anything. You're not, okay? Don't be afraid of, don't be anxious about anything. But in every situation you're into, whether something that's overwhelming or something that is, that you can handle, in every situation, whether you can handle it or not, go to prayer. Talk to God. And with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Make God your most important counselor. Speak to your Father. And guess what? The peace of God that transcends all understanding will keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So there's a bigger remedy than Ganoderma. It's prayer. So if we have prayer, we have health, we have our red reishi. Then for those of us who are struggling through some mental health problems, God will see us through. All right. We apologize for